In words and pictures, a book tells the story of surviving Sandy. That's next on Perspective New Jersey. Hi, I'm Nora Mushanek and welcome to Perspective New Jersey. It wasn't too long ago well, I wouldn't say celebrate, certainly. We marked the one-year anniversary of Superstorm Sandy's landfall and the destruction it caused at the Jersey Shore. Much has been written about that terrible storm, and there's a book out that may be of interest to shore lovers and those affected by the storm. It's called Surviving Sandy and focuses mostly on Long Beach Island. It was written by Scott Mazzella, a former reporter with strong ties to LBI, and is chock full of photographs before, during, and after the storm. And Scott, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Former reporter, now an author. How does it feel to have the book out?
Oh, it feels great. It feels wonderful. I've been teaching. I've been a teacher for about 8 years now, so it's thrilling to have this experience and be a teacher at the same time.
Where are you teaching? What do you do?
I teach social studies in 7th grade in the Old Bridge Township Public School District up in Central Jersey. And since I got this project in January, they've kind of ridden along with me along this whole spectrum of emotion and frustration and then success. So it's been great.
Excellent. You measured storms by, or most people measure storms by comparing them to the '62 storm. But by your calculation and almost everyone else's, Sandy was a whole different ballgame.
I'm actually glad you said '62 storm because, you know, my travels, everyone thinks of Irene. But definitely, Superstorm Sandy, if there was any storm that could be on the same level, or Sandy actually beats it, would be the '62 storm. Very few people have an idea of what that means. Yeah, Sandy was more like the perfect storm from 1991 over land.
The combination of all these different storms coming together and wreaking havoc.
Absolutely.
Now, as we mentioned before, there are some amazing pictures in here, and we'll be looking at some of them, but this is also, there's a lot of narrative in there. Talk about why that decision, and what did you want to, why do that?
Well, everyone involved in the book had lost something in Sandy. My folks, my family has a house down in Holgate, suffered severe damage. The publisher's home and business suffered severe damage. Everyone from the layout artist to our editor, to the people who contributed photos, everybody suffered some loss. And we couldn't just put a picture book out for that. We had to tell the story, and to tell the story you have to go out there and talk to people and get their stories, get those feelings, get that sense of what it was like to be there during the storm. And I think we accomplished that.
Now, you structured the book sort of like before, during, and after. By the way, that's a picture of Holgate that we're looking at right there, where the dunes were just literally wiped away. But you structured it before, during, and after. How come?
Well, originally I wrote a history book. As a history teacher, I kind of looked at it like, we're going to do Great Storms of the Jersey Shore, which is Down the Shore Publishing's
another book. I have that one.
Right, this is the companion book to that book. And I wrote it like a history book because that's my frame of reference. But when we got to the editing phase, we kind of all went to a local restaurant, sat down and talked, and we pretty much decided, you know, we need to do this as a story. The editor was definitely adamant about that, and he was right. We went back, I wrote it as a narrative, and I think it works much better as a narrative. It's a thrill ride for whoever reads it.
Now, in terms of preparing, you've profiled a number of the families here, and one of them was the Boker family. Tell us about them. They're down at the end of Holgate. Tell us about the preps they went through and what happened.
They're a survivalist family and a spiritual family. Eileen Boker, who owns the business down in Holgate, decided to stay through the storm. But she was separated from the other half of her family, her husband and her daughters, who could not get over the bridge in time by the time they closed it. She stayed. The boys felt, her teenage boys felt that God would protect them. He wouldn't necessarily protect structures, and he would protect them because they were there to watch over the neighborhood. That's what they told me. So during the storm, it got to the point where the waves were coming underneath the oceanfront homes, and Eileen was kind of having second thoughts. And she turns to her son and says, what do you think we should do? Because they had an option of going to a neighbor's home. They left a key. It's a bit of a higher home. And he said, let's look for a sign. And just at that moment, and this detailed in the book, a wave took the bathhouse across the street, the public bathroom and showers, and sent it right down the street, and he turned to his mother and he said, well, that's a sign. And then they left with their massive Mastiff in a kayak, and I think it's their survivalist attitude. They're surfers. They had the gear. They were ready to go. They weren't going to take no for an answer, and they were safe.
But in the narrative, you also talk about the part of what they prepared was backpacks. They lashed kayaks to the porch.
Absolutely, they knew what they were doing. The best word I keep coming to is survivalist, because I don't think the typical family would have prepared that way. They had the dry suits ready. They had things in Ziploc bags. They were ready to go if they needed to go.
Now, at the time of this storm, when it was hitting, there were still, I think, an estimated 2,000 people still on the island. They were folks who, couldn't get out, wouldn't get out? Who were they?
Some couldn't, most wouldn't. You had people who were very much adamant about staying with their home. They were worried that if they left the island, they would not be able to get back to their home if they closed the island for a length of time, which they did. The people who couldn't were the people who said to themselves, well, I'll leave Monday morning. And not many people expected the severe flooding Sunday night into Monday, which is what prevented a lot of people from leaving.
And part of the reason people were skeptical was because, Irene had happened the year before and they called for evacuations?
Exactly. We term it the Irene effect. When I interviewed people at the National Weather Service in Mount Holly, they talked about this as well, where people focus too much on their previous experience with a tropical storm, or in this case, Hurricane Irene, which for the shore wasn't that big a deal. For North Jersey and the flooding, it was. So their frame of mind was, it's going to be like Irene. And the National Weather Service put out a personal plea trying to tell people this is going to be 1962 again. But you had to be around in 62 to understand what that meant.
And a lot of people weren't.
Right. So people were thinking Irene, and they got something entirely different.
You write in here about the Angleside Inn, and that was sort of a staging ground for the first responders, the folks who were going to stay on the island?
Yeah, the Angleside Inn, after 62, the owners put in a massive, almost like a retaining wall that would block the ocean. And in severe storms, the fire department and the police department end up moving their apparatus up there because they felt it was a safe building, and it always has proven to be safe. And in Sandy, it was proven to be safe again. But right across the street, you had the Seashell Motel, which suffered severe damage without a wall of their own, which is detailed in the book as well.
But at Angleside, that's where sort of the safe space. Everybody, they're cooking there, they're staying there.
Yeah, the owners of the Angleside Inn were very hospitable to everybody who came in, and they did do that. They had generators. They made sure everybody was as comfortable as possible, including the first responders. And that was after the storm as well. A lot of them had to stay even when they suffered damage to their own homes. They stayed there.
Okay, we need to take a break, but we're going to be back with more with Scott Mazzella and his book, Surviving Sandy, right after this. Please stay with us. Hi, we're back, and we're here with author Scott Mazzella, and we're talking about his book, Surviving Sandy, which has just come out recently, words and pictures about last year's superstorm that devastated the Jersey Shore. And Scott, as the storm's getting closer and closer, the water's going up in the streets of LBI, and there are people who haven't evacuated, can't evacuate it, and they start calling the police. Tell me some of the stories you heard about that and what the officers and the first responders down there were doing.
One of the challenges on Long Beach Island is there are many municipalities, and they all have different first responders. If you were in Long Beach Township and called the police, they did their best to get to you with apparatus, but if the apparatus couldn't go through the water because it was too high, they would sometimes use aluminum boats and whatnot to get to you. Beach Haven used watercraft like jet skis and wave runners. The township had a bus to evacuate people on. Many people in the townships and the municipalities would be rescued by an officer in a little skiff or boat and then taken to a truck, which would take them to a local firehouse, and then the National Guard would take them off island. And sometimes the National Guard went and picked people up as well. So many things going on.
Well, now that you mention that, I know all about that because we were hunkered down with the cops from LBI for a while, and we expected to stay there, but we had to evacuate as well. And and when I say we, I mean my cameraman Andy Doan and I. And so I wanted to share with our viewers a look at what it was like that day, that afternoon when the storm was hitting in the streets of Long Beach Island. Watch this. This was something different. That afternoon, as the storm hit Long Beach Island, photographer Andy Doan shot what he could, then parked our news van outside Town Hall in Brant Beach. We stripped it of every piece of equipment we could.
I'm thinking to myself, this van won't be here when I get back, because the way they were talking about the storm coming in harder.
We hunkered down with the Long Beach Township Police, but not for long. One of the cops comes busting through the door and says, everybody out of here in 5 minutes. The winds were becoming too much for the building to withstand, so we had to evacuate. The officers helped us load all our gear onto a police bus. You can see it and its yellow flashing lights in the reflection on the windows.
Oh my God, look at that.
Okay, go slow. Go slow. Wait till it's finished.
As we moved north on the island, I shot these pictures of the ocean breaching the dunes and flowing into the streets. Some officers got out of the bus to clear the way.
And we got hit by a wave while we were moving some of that debris. I will tell you, I will never forget the sound of that thump when a wave hit a house behind us.
See those yellow headlights behind the bus? That's Lieutenant Paul Vereb, who was following our bus in another vehicle.
It was definitely getting a little scary. It was like every third or fourth wave would kind of go over top of the hood, and that gave you kind of a creepy feeling.
All of a sudden, the bus stops in the middle of the main street.
Our driver, Officer Brian Curlin, got the bus restarted, and eventually we got through the flooding and over the bridge. That was another wild ride. And like hundreds of other evacuees, arrived at the Southern Regional High School shelter in Stafford. That's one of the cots we slept on for 2 nights.
My legs were sticking out the other end, and my head was sticking out the other end, so it's kind of hard for me to get comfortable.
I had a really hard time because Andy snores like a grizzly bear. When Sandy passed, we went back to LBI to survey the damage, which was astounding and heartbreaking, and still is. That's the thing that really gets to you. After a year, some of these folks are still out and will never even get back in. It was quite an experience, as you can tell. Scott, tell me how the people on the island described it to you after this storm hits, or is hitting the island. How do they describe it? How are they feeling when they've seen storm surges like they've never seen before?
It depends on who you ask. We had people that were scared, people that definitely regretted staying. But once they stayed, and there was nothing they could do, they got their spirit up as best they could, and their strength, and they did what they could do to survive. And then afterwards, some made the best of it by treating it almost like, well, we're here. Let's raid our neighbor's fridge and cook on the grill we can find, and they rough it and they not enjoy it, but they make the most of it. Others found it very depressing with the National Guard and the police presence so strong and not being able to go anywhere that they ended up leaving the island. Eventually, they couldn't take it. The best part was the fact that people started coming together. They would gravitate towards the firehouses or anywhere that there was a working stove or oven. They would bring perishables, and they would get together as a community, and they would really get that hometown spirit with one another as best they could during this really trying time.
Do you believe that people feared for their lives during that storm?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, is that what they were telling you?
They didn't say it point blank like that. I think people like to keep their pride after storms. You know, I wasn't scared, but yeah, with the Bokers, you know, she was relying on her faith through the whole storm, but at the same time, she's watching the bathhouse go down the street with her 2 boys, and she has to make sure they're safe. So that has to be scary.
And houses leaving their foundations and literally driving down the street or floating down the street.
Right, which is what one of the people who stayed, my neighbors, actually people who took the cover shot, Carl and Susan Clark. They watched the house come right down their street and grab their car and take it across the street. I mean, the kind of unfathomable images they're watching play out before their eyes, it must have been incredible.
How did you go about doing your interviews, or did you know right away? Did you start talking to people about their experiences, or how did you decide what to do?
Well, it was tough. Most of the time, one interview led to another interview. At one point, I was actually interviewed myself by a crew doing a documentary called Landfall: The Eyes of Sandy by Andrew Pearson and Corrine Gray Ruff, and they led me to a lot of people as well. They shared interviews, I shared my interviews, we got each other into places, and we worked as a team, even though they were completely separate projects. So that's the kind of storm Sandy was. It brought people together in all sorts of ways, including myself.
Did you have to cajole people into talking to you, or were they willing?
Well, if they didn't want to talk, we didn't push them. I mean, this was so soon after Sandy. There were a couple people I really wanted their story, and they were not going to have it. And I didn't want to push them. If they said no, we tried to push a little, but we respected people's privacy.
And why those stories in particular? Did you get most of the stories you
yeah,
wanted?
Absolutely. I mean, this book is the story. I mean, it's the tale that if somebody's reading this 100 years from now, they'll definitely get an accurate sense of what happened on the island.
And when did you do your writing? You're a teacher. I'm assuming you have lesson plans and you have classes. How did you pull this off?
Miraculously somehow. Really, I have to thank my wife first, because I'm a father of 2 young children, and she gave me a lot of leeway to work a lot. My son would sit next to me. He's 4, and I would talk to him about what I was doing. He actually handled it very maturely. So she gets first credit, because I couldn't have done it without her. But I also had a great team behind me. Down the Shore Publishing is a close-knit group. Our editor, Steve Warren, we were on the phone all the time, bouncing things off of each other. So it was a team effort. My name's on the book, but it really was a team project. So that's how we got it done.
Okay, we need to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more of Scott Mazzella right after this. Please stay with us. Hi, we're back, and we're talking about with Scott Mazzella, the author of Surviving Sandy. It's a new book in written word and pictures about the storm that devastated the Jersey Shore a year ago. And Scott, I want to talk a little bit about the Shack. It's this iconic place. Describe what it is, what it meant to people down there, and what happened to it.
The Shack is this old fishing, almost like a hut, like a little cottage on Route 72, just as you near the end of the bridges that go onto the island. The Shack is basically, for anyone who vacations there, you've arrived when you've seen the Shack.
And you drive by it, and it's been out there for 1,000,000 years, right?
It seems like 1,000,000 years since I was a kid. We always looked for the Shack when we went down the shore. And unfortunately, Sandy was the Shack's demise.
Now that was a big deal down there, right?
It's funny, because it seemed like it was a bigger deal to people who vacation there than it was for people who live there.
Really?
I don't know if it's just because you get used to things, but in the book details of the last folks who saw the Shack, they watched it fall into the ocean as they're being evacuated off the island. A man named Ed Hoffman sees the Shack fall into the sea. It just, the waves tear. He's the last guy to see it standing. He turns to everyone. You can imagine the wind's billowing this canvas top of this National Guard truck, and he turns to everybody in there in the middle of a hurricane saying, "The Shack is gone, the Shack is gone." And they all cheered.
Oh, no,
and
really?
When he told me that, I was like, really? And at first I was like, do locals really not like the Shack? But it turned